Hi, Dad.
Hi, Emily.
We're not very good at those intros. Yeah, today I'm joined with my dad. We thought this would be an interesting podcast episode because my dad has been with me through a lot of stuff, a lot of anxiety. And I had my first panic attack at 10. I'm now 26. Am I 26? Yeah, I think so. So it's been many years of going through pretty severe anxiety problems. And I just thought it'd be interesting to hear my dad's perspective on what that's been like as a dad, trying to support a child and an adult as well with anxiety. But the first question is, what is your story? If you were telling somebody about your daughter with anxiety, how would you describe that?
I would describe my daughter with anxiety from a parental perspective, from a father's perspective, as something which is very difficult to understand. It's something that's very difficult to understand because there's no obvious physical manifestations of anxiety. I mean, there is from time to time, but generally speaking, it's an internal thing. So we look at you and a parent's automatic response to any child in distress is to go into fix-it mode. And it's very difficult to go into fix-it mode when it's not an obvious physical issue. So I guess from my perspective, what's been difficult from a parent's perspective is dealing with that difference between physical and mental, and trying to sort of reset my filter and reset myself to deal with something that's not obvious as a physical disability would be, perhaps.
Have you ever spoken to, I know you've spoken to friends and family members, extended family members and stuff about anxiety and about my condition and stuff like that. And it's not always been met with total love and understanding. And is that something that you struggled with as somebody that's trying to kind of fight for somebody that has anxiety?
Absolutely. It's the most frustrating thing to have to explain to somebody. Yes, Emily is a very charming, very sociable young woman. However, there are times when Emily is not able to function. And the times when she's not able to function, even pre-panic attack, even when you're not having a panic attack, but you think that you might do, and you have to manage that situation, to try and explain to people who, my daughter, who is outwardly a very gregarious, articulate young woman, can be crushed by this. And because they don't see that on a regular basis, they find it difficult to understand. And it's very difficult as a parent to explain that to them. However, some people are very understanding. I mean, some of our friends, as you know, are very, very understanding. But I guess sometimes it's part of my role as your father to try and explain to people, how you deal with this on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think I have been lucky because you're somebody that a lot of men find it difficult to talk about emotion, and you're somebody that doesn't find that difficult, or you might, but I don't know, it doesn't seem like you find it that difficult to talk about things that might look like they're made up or something like that. Do you know what I mean? It sounds like within your group of friends and stuff, even a group of men in their 50s, that's not usually the kind of men that you think will be talking about emotions and stuff, but it sounds like you and your friends are.
No. Yeah,
No
yeah.
offense.
I mean, some of my friends, not all of them. Not all of them. But as you know, Emily, that's how I was brought up by my mum and dad.
Yeah.
Especially my mum.
Yeah.
So, that's kudos to my mum, because she's brought me up to be a more understanding individual and not be afraid of talking about difficult things and things that are emotional.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, it wasn't, I mean, we may get to this from a questions perspective, but initially, as you were saying, when you first started to develop anxiety, it wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy to actually understand, because a parent's automatic reaction is, how can I fix this? And it's just not easy to fix.
That's a good point, because I would like to talk about that, about, I was very young when I first started getting anxiety, and back then, I know it wasn't even that long ago, but back then, mental health wasn't the first thing people thought of. And it wasn't really that known, to be honest. And one of my questions was, did you know about anxiety disorders before?
No, I didn't.
No.
I didn't. I mean, I was aware of the mainstream mental health, areas, but anxiety I didn't think that anxiety. Obviously everybody suffers from anxiety to an extent, a lesser or greater extent. As you know, when I worked doing presentations around the UK, I got a deal, a certain degree of anxiety, but I didn't know it would be that debilitating. I didn't know it could be all consuming. And that to me was a real eye opener. And I guess, when you were developing anxiety, you were still very young. I mean, you were still probably, I don't know, probably 9, 10 years old, maybe even a bit younger. And I didn't know, and neither did your mum. We didn't really know how we'd deal with that. But fortunately, some of my very close friends, a chap that lives just down the road, who worked in that industry, was able to tell me that it's unconditional support. It's no pressure. It's unconditional support. And that to me is key. And not thinking I can fix this, because I can't really fix this. It's not something that you can wave a magic wand on or put a bandage on or a plaster. This is something that is very difficult for a parent to deal with. But, from my perspective, having people around me that advise me in that way led me to develop this kind of unconditional support, if you like, which meant that I just wanted to be there for you and support you. Obviously not judge, try and educate people around us so the environment becomes easier, because it's not just about me and your mum, it's about the wider environment. And I guess you're lucky that you've developed some amazing friendships with people locally. That's wonderful too. So that's fabulous.
I was wondering, what are the emotions that come up for you when you see me panic, when you see me in a really, me and my dad, for those of you that don't know, we do exposure therapy together. And that means, what that is I've got agoraphobia. And so we kind of go in the car and we try it out, and we'll go maybe 10 minutes away, 20 minutes away from home and just see how it goes. But sometimes that ends in panic. And what are the emotions that come up for you when you see me going through that? I
go through so many emotions. I go through crushing helplessness. That is probably the overriding emotion that I go through. I can't, to see your daughter go through a panic attack, or even pre-panic attack, or even struggle to, on a given day, drive 15 minutes and have a wander around. I just feel so helpless. The overriding feeling from a parent's perspective of not being able to grab you and fix it is just so difficult. That is probably the main emotion that I feel. But then I also try and sort of get that in a person from your perspective, and try and separate your anxiety and you, and try and sort of, try and deal with it that way. But it is very difficult.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when you're having a panic attack, you can't really think about anyone else or anything else, or that. I mean, sometimes I don't even know that other people exist when I'm having a panic attack. It's just but I think you deal with it really well, because I think, like you were saying, when I first started having panic attacks, it was maybe met with more frustration from you and my mum, because it was like you didn't understand what was happening at all. It was kind of like, what are you doing? Why are you suddenly just having this tantrum in the car? What's going on? And I was only young, so maybe you thought it was tantrums, or you thought it was you were like, what the hell's going on with this child?
Oh, well, I didn't think it was a tantrum. I thought it might have been. I mean, if you recall, we sort of saw various people along the way. We saw cognitive behavioral therapists. We saw other kind of healthcare professionals. We even went to see people about thyroid levels, and could that be part of it? So you're searching for an answer constantly. That's what you're on a journey of trying to find an answer, and the answer actually is love, understanding, and support. That is ultimately the answer. There's no other. You can't see somebody through therapy necessarily, or through drugs, and get an answer. The answer is, understanding what's possible, being supportive, and just trying to go on the journey with you, and be there when you need us.
Yeah, I think a lot of people with mental health problems or any invisible illness are still constantly looking for answers all the time, and they'll see new articles that are like, oh, have you thought about your calcium levels, or whatever it is, and then you suddenly are fixated on, oh, it could be my calcium, I could be, if I drink more milk, maybe I'll be cured. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll ask you a question. I know that's not necessarily what we're doing here, but I mean, do you find that at different times of the year, I'm thinking about the seasons. I mean, you get hay fever. You don't like hot weather. I'm thinking during the summer, hay fever, hot weather, or, that's a recipe for, oh my goodness, whereas during the winter, bit cooler, bit darker, or even the autumn, no hay fever around. I mean, do you feel seasonal changes to your anxiety?
Yeah, I do. And a lot of people actually have their mental health gets worse during winter when it's dark and there's less stuff to do and people are more inward. But for me with anxiety, that suits me. Like, as you know, when it was lockdown, I was actually thriving because I didn't have to do anything. I was at the same level as everyone else.
Yeah, everybody was in the same boat, weren't they? Nobody could do anything. Everybody had to stay inside, and that was your life. So everybody came and did exactly the same as you. And is that because you felt? Is that because you are aware of how different you are to other people? And does that bother you? I mean,
yeah, and it just shows that actually we compare ourselves to other people constantly. I'm constantly actually when I watch TV and stuff. If I'm watching TV and somebody's on a boat or somebody's on a plane or somebody's whatever, I'm always thinking, I can't do that. That's my internal monologue constantly is, I can't do that. So this month, I don't know if I've mentioned to you, but this month I've decided I'm not going to do anything that makes me extremely anxious. I'm just going to live my life and just be cycling on my bike and going to the beach and stuff and not thinking about being normal. And hopefully that'll help.
Well, I mean, to an extent, because you live in a really nice part of the world, you can do things that other people can't do. You can cycle around, you can go to the beach, you can go and do all sorts of bits and bobs. And we've got nice cafes and stuff like that here. So
yeah, we've got a lot.
There's stuff you can do. Yeah, we're quite lucky in that way, aren't we?
If someone my age was struggling with mental health problems now and their parents weren't that supportive, what advice would you give them? Like, is there anything that helped you to understand? Like, because there was times when you didn't understand. There was times when we found it hard to communicate. And what kind of things would help a dad or a mum understand?
I think what would help a dad and a mum is probably two or three things. Is you sometimes look at your child and say, can you snap out of this, please? This is not working for anybody. Think about that individual child, what that child is going through personally, not being able to take part in, various activities with their friends. I remember you were unable to take part in various activities with your friends, and how upsetting must that be? So I'd say to mums and dads, think about your child, think about how they feel, absolute classic empathy, and think about the fact that they don't want this. They never asked for this. It's not a choice that they're making. That's key. They're not making a choice to have this. This is something that they've got. And, with that unconditional support that you should be giving that child, they will flourish as you have. And then, gradually over time, your boundaries get slightly bigger. And I don't mean physical boundaries as in you can go further, but you can do more things. It's not about, can I go to Glasgow or can I go to New York for a holiday? This is about you doing things like, for instance, I'm going to cycle around, where we live now, which is fantastic. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, you might not have even thought about doing that. So
no.
work with your son or your daughter, massively empathize, don't judge them, give them unconditional support and love, and help them to increase their boundaries at their pace. At their pace. It's not about your pace, it's about their pace.
Yeah, I think people, like you said, they just are so I think it comes from a place of love. They're so eager for their child to get better. They're just so desperate for them to get better that they end up making them not better. And I empathise with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's difficult though. I mean, it is difficult because as a parent, you automatically want to go into fixed mode. I think we've said that before. And you can't go into fixed mode very easily on something like this. You can, but it takes time. And, it's not a quick fix like a broken leg is or a sprained ankle or, the measles or something. This is any mental health illness will take time, and everybody has to participate in it. It's not just about mum and dad. It's also about the wider family, as you said. Making sure that they understand, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges, actually. Not just personally for us, but I think generally speaking, because people only see people only see you occasionally. If it's more distant relatives, and when they see you, the chances are you're going to be on your best behaviour and trying to sort of be nice and pleasant, which confuses them, because then they'll say, "But there's nothing wrong with him or her, because I saw them yesterday and they were fantastic." Yes, but that's one tiny little 5 minutes out of a whole year or a whole life.
Yeah.
It's almost like they don't believe you. It's almost like they think you're fibbing for some reason. I just don't get it.
Yeah. I think that's how a lot of people feel with mental health problems, is everyone's going to think I'm faking it. Everyone's going to think this, but yeah, you just need to act how you feel and not worry about that. But the last thing I was going to ask is for you to tell a story, a little story of a time that we went through a panic attack together, and I want to hear from your perspective.
There's probably two, but I'm going to go with the one where you and I went away. So we probably, when was it? Probably about 5 or 6 years ago, actually, way pre-lockdown. I'd booked an absolutely lovely little holiday cottage near a crannock, which is like, the inland sort of like Stone Age building within a lake. And it was a beautiful place, stunning place. And it was probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours drive from where we live here in Edinburgh. And we were both excited about it. You were excited about it too. And we set off probably about 10 o'clock in the morning. And in the car, we had a nice big comfortable car with the air conditioning on. And you were quite quiet, actually, in the car. And I started to think, this is going to be tricky. But me being me was sort of saying, and we can do this when we get there, and we can do that when we get there, and blah, 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 blah. And you were going, yeah. And we arrived there probably about lunchtime, maybe just after 1 o'clock. And it was a beautiful place. I loved it. And the lady who was letting it to us had left bottles of wine there and lots of games and things like that. And you were sat on the sofa looking out the window across this loch. And I said, it's gorgeous, isn't it? And I could tell on your face right there and then that you were struggling. And I'll be honest, my heart sank a bit, because I wanted you to have a great time. I wanted you to get away, and I wanted to as well. It's a bit some selfishness there as well. And yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a bit selfish.
No.
And I started leafing through the games and saying, we can play this, we can play that game. And you said, yeah, I'm just going to go for a lie down. I remember you saying, I'm just going to go for a lie down, which I think is code that you use for, I'm struggling here. I'm really struggling here. And you disappeared to one of the bedrooms and you lay down for about 20 minutes. And I was in the kitchen faffing about. And you came back through and you said, I can't do this. And you had your anxiety look on your face where you put your hand to your mouth and you're sort of like that. And you're sort of trying to sort of like cope. And the physical emotions that you're feeling, I can't even begin to guess at, to be honest with you. And we've spoken about this a long time over the last number of years, but I can't even begin to think what it must be like to have a panic attack, or even slightly pre-panic attack, in terms of how your body feels. But I've got to just understand. I've got to just say, right, this is happening. We can't stay here. So we jumped in the car, and actually we jumped in the car, and you could only drive, and this is probably about an hour and a half away from Edinburgh up north, and you could only drive 100 yards at a time before we had to pull over and you had to open the car door to get fresh air, even though all the windows in the car were open, the sunroof was open, and it was snowing. So the snow was coming in through all the windows, through the sunroof, but we still had to pull over every 100, 150 yards. We eventually made it over these moors, and we eventually made it towards Edinburgh. And I think the minute you started to recognise where you were again, your anxiety just went and dropped, massively dropped, actually. So much so that you got hungry, and we grabbed something to eat, and we eventually got home, a wee bit later, and I could tell that it was, I think, from my perspective, the crushing anxiety that you had there, it's very difficult to do it justice, with me talking now. But I just remember I had to hold your hand in the car with all the windows open and snow coming in through all the windows and pull over all the time. This was you reaching the edge of your panic attack ability to be able to handle it, I think. And it was so distressing to see from my perspective. And I can't even imagine how distressing it would have been for you. But it taught me a lot about, going away and things like that. And I guess we got back and you felt a lot calmer. I think you were living at home at the time, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd not moved into your flat. So you as soon as you got back with your little carry out, you were absolutely fine. So it was a real eye opener for me, that it really was, and distressing for me to see you like that, because I'm powerless. What can I do apart from get you back to your safe area, get you back to where you feel less anxious? That's the only thing I could do. I couldn't sort of wave anyone's. We couldn't stay there. It was a shame. But yeah, that was a real challenging.
I think what you just said about not being able to actually really articulate or get someone to understand how that anxiety looks and feels, because I try to explain it to people and I just can't quite explain it, because it's like it's not explainable. But also from your perspective, you can't really explain it to people. But I also think that while that was one of the most horrible experiences I've had with panic, I'm also really grateful for it, because I think it helped you to understand more what anxiety really looks like and like the severity of it. And if any parents are listening just now, the only thing that I would ask for parents, the main thing that helps me is knowing that somebody's not angry at you for experiencing the pain that you're going through. Because I think if we're in the car and you'd been like, oh, for God's sake, which I would understand that emotion from you too, because it's frustrating. But even if you are feeling extremely frustrated and even angry, just hide it. Just hide it. Tell your wife about it or tell your friend about it. Don't tell your child that's struggling about it.
But you're dead right. And from your perspective, feeling that your parents are angry with you because you've got anxiety, you're having panic attacks, must be horrendous. It must be absolutely horrendous. And I would echo what you've said. If anybody's listening to this, please don't judge your child. They're not meaning to do this. It's not a choice they're making. The more you support them and understand, the better it will be. The more you get angry and don't understand and judge, the worse it will be.
I agree, and that's a good place to end, I think. We've talked about quite a lot, and it's actually felt quite emotional for me, and it's hard to talk about certain panic attacks, but it's really cool that you talk about this stuff openly, and I think I hope it will help somebody.
That's the reason why I want to do it, Emily. I want to really, as much as possible, help people, because it's not an easy thing to understand. And the more people can talk about things like this, and the more people, can reach out for help and support whoever's going through this, suffering from really bad anxiety, the better. So I'm delighted to help. It's been lovely to speak to you, and it's been quite emotional for me too. Yeah,
it's been nice. Thank you for coming on. We might ask you to come back at some point. It's been nice having you.
Okay, be my pleasure.
This feels very formal for a father and daughter to speak.
Okay,
been nice to meet you, Dominic.
Yes, call me Mr. Mason.
Thank you. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye-bye.